creating vampire minions to do my bidding, raising a massive gothic castle from the shadows, using cool arcane magic to turn myself into a bat, and draining the world dry as a rising bloodlord. Today I played one of the darkest open world vampire RPGs ever made. I played 100% of Vampires Bloodlord Rising. My story began over a century ago. A plague was running rampant in my village, and my brother was dying. He seemed to accept his fate, but I, on the other hand, couldn't. And that was when Virago appeared. He saved us from dying by turning us into vampires. And of course, we joined him, as we were grateful. Virago wasn't like your typical vampire. He believed that humans could live with us in harmony. However, not everyone felt the same way. So they started an inquisition and sieged Viragos' castle, where we all lived. Virago ended up sacrificing himself to save my brother and I once again. And all of the holy priests in the Inquisition casted a spell, creating a veil, weakening all of the monsters of the night. This caused my brother and I to go into hiding. Many years had gone by, and I had heard whispers. My name is Dragos, and this is how my story began. I finally woke up after a century. My brother Razvin seemed to be missing from his coffin. I immediately hopped back into mine, and saw that I could only sleep during daytime. This crypt didn't look very comfy, but hey, I'm a vampire, so I guess I like this kind of thing. I re-got my bearings for how to move around, as I haven't walked in over 100 years. It looks like I have a blood and existence meter. Apparently, my blood is always decreasing, and when I completely run out, my existence starts to fade. Let's just say, I never want my existence to run out. Otherwise, I fully die. I came across my very first victim in a long time, a stag. After chasing him a little bit, I was able to catch him and drink his blood to restore some of my blood meter.
The castle hill.
As I got my first taste of blood, I heard Virago's voice in my head.
Is it really you? We're all dead. But in the castle, my power remains.
Weirdly enough, it seemed like the more blood that I drank, the more I could hear him. That was when I stumbled across a mausoleum. There appeared to be bones everywhere in it, which I collected. You never know when those will come in handy. I also got some information stating that I would respawn here in case I ever ran out of existence and died. So these were basically like checkpoints, and places to sleep during the day.
If dawn finds me before I reach the castle hill, the mausoleum will make a fine shelter.
I also stumbled across a chest, which I took everything out of super quickly. The same button that you use to interact with the chest takes all from the chest. I didn't really notice that in the moment, but we'll pretend that I did. While I was leaving the mausoleum, I opened up my inventory, and then saw an arcane skill tree. There were a lot, so I looked at the most basic ones, like increased movement speed and increased maximum blood capacity. I could also equip and unequipped items, as you'd expect. There also was a world map, a management tab, a building tab, and a journal tab. There was also a skill tab showing skill levels. I figured that I was going to be using a lot of those later on, so I headed back out and continued on my journey. It looks like it's dinner time. After very aggressively putting down my dinner, I came across some Inquisitors. Apparently, they poison their own veins to prevent themselves from being bit by vampires like me. I honestly had no clue how to fight, but I learned pretty quickly. That was awesome. I feel like a superhero. After taking out the two Inquisitors, I looted them, and then came across a vampire tier. Real quick, if you're enjoying the video, hit that subscribe button.
So many vampires perished fighting the Inquisition. What remains of their power has taken the form of tears and by absorbing them, I can give their sacrifices meaning.
It turns out that these vampire tiers are how you purchase talents in the Arcane tab. So I'm basically absorbing the powers from these old vampires. I used my very first vampire tier to upgrade my movement speed by 7%. Huge shout out to that fallen vampire, I guess. Ooh, an axe. I continued on my journey through the valley. I was basically able to teleport, as I had the dash ability. This turned me into a bunch of bats and made me reappear whichever direction I was facing a couple feet in front of me. I snuck up on a couple more Inquisitors, and then took them on. It appeared that any red attack I couldn't block, so I had to move out of the way if the enemies charged up a red attack. Yellow ones I could counter. And we've got another vampire tier. This time, I increased my max blood by 10% with it. I also grabbed some more random loot. I then came across a bunch of limestone boulders, which I destroyed with my bare hands. There happened to be some guardian tomes right next to the limestone mine, so I grabbed them and then made my way up a very sketchy wooden tower. The tower led me up to a mausoleum and what looked to be the entrance of a village.
One man, alone on the village outskirts. Oh, it's been so long since I tasted human blood.
I snuck up on the man, and then I drank his blood. I felt pretty bad about killing him. His name was Simon, but I haven't had that kind of blood in a long time. I stopped in the mausoleum and made sure that I had it discovered, in case I ever needed to respawn nearby. I also grabbed some of the bones that were just chilling in here. It was time to enter into the village. Apparently, the villagers could tell that I was a vampire, so I had to hide in some tall grass so they wouldn't see me. This didn't really end up working out. The second that I stepped out of it, they saw me, and then ran into the village to alert everyone. I guess it didn't really matter though because I made it to where I needed to, the old castle. As I approached, it was basically just all ruins, which wasn't very impressive looking. Hey, it's my brother, Resvin.
Looks like you finally got tired of napping, little brother.
The voice, Virago's voice, woke me. You think he survived?
We talked, and it seemed like he didn't think that our master Virago was still alive. But this giant crystal that was just sitting here at the heart of the castle seemed to have his powers attached to it. He then proceeded to tell me that he had come out of the crypt just like I did, and then buried me back in there so the Inquisitors wouldn't come poking. We both agreed that we needed to restore the core back to its full power. After looking at its management screen though, this was gonna take a lot of blood. I started filling the core with some of the blood that I collected.
Do you feel that?
Yes, like something is soothing my hunger.
Feed the core, and the core shall feed all vampires upon the castle hill.
It seemed like this core was connected to all of the vampires in our bloodline. The more power it had, the more power we all had. Razvin and I had an idea. If we were able to get the core powerful enough, maybe it would be able to destroy the veil that those Inquisitor priests casted on all of the lands. Only one problem though. The lands had been broken up into 4 different parts, and we now only had one of them. So we were gonna have to go and conquer the other 3 parts. In other words, we were gonna have to take on the Inquisitors and take back our lands from them. This seemed like a very ambitious goal, but at least my brother was here to do it with me, and maybe we'll be able to recruit some help along the way. Resvin told me to build a crypt, so that way we would have a place to put our coffins in and sleep during the day, because apparently if we didn't, the sunlight would melt us. I quickly started grabbing as many resources as I possibly could, and then started planning out where I wanted to place down the crypt. There were some ruins in what I thought was the perfect place to place it down, so I had to clear out the ruins. Finally, I can plan this thing out. I now had to go and get all of the resources to actually construct it. It seemed like I was gonna need a lot. To take a break from all of the construction, I headed out on a little stroll into the woods. That was when I came across a stag and decided to feed on it. I really needed to fill up my blood meter again, as I had donated a lot of blood to the core. While I was out, I also cut down some trees to get some wood. I then headed back to camp and was ready to build a crafting station. I was gonna need this to craft all of the materials I need to build my crypt. Once I built it, I immediately hopped on it to see what I could craft. I saw wood planks, chiseled limestone, and a shattered bone mask. I didn't see mortar though. I kind of just forgot about it for now and started to craft myself some wooden planks. And that was when I came across all of the unknown resources. So mortar was something that I was going to have to learn the recipe for. I headed towards the nearby river, as there was likely going to be ingredients to craft mortar there. I have absolutely no clue why, but I decided to take a leap of faith, and didn't take any fall damage. Being a vampire really is awesome. Of course, I came across clay and sand, which is exactly what I was gonna need to craft myself some mortar. I also came across an Inquisitor camp, which I didn't want to deal with right now. Virago informed me that the core could teleport me back to the castle, so that's exactly what I did. I'm really starting to like these vampire abilities. Once I made it back to the crafting station, I started to craft some mortar. I then made some chiseled limestone. Once all of it was done, I headed over to where I planned out the crypt. I then got building away. Honestly, the building in this game is really fun. You have to place down every individual piece. After a couple minutes, the crypt was completely constructed. I now only had to place down a chest and a coffin. I felt like royalty because the door to the crypt automatically opened for me. I then placed my very first coffin and chest. Apparently, I can put items in that chest and companions would come by and use them, if I had any, of course. I'm just gonna go ahead and drop this in here, because I don't want to be the one crafting and building everything. After I got the chest organized, I talked to Razvan. He gave me some of Virago's old royal clothing. The intent of this was if I looked like royalty, the people wouldn't be scared of me. But if I came down in a hunter outfit, they definitely would be. I could now quickly change clothes in case I was in the presence of any villagers, just so I didn't scare them all off and make them think that I'm evil. Well, there's only one way to test this disguise out. It's time to head to the village. I did notice that I wasn't able to do my dash when dressed in royal clothing. This was a little bit irritating, but hey, I had to play the part. I finally made it over to the village, and I made my way over to the village trader.
Well, Dragos, Virago's right hand. I was sure you were gone.
Razvan and I hid and waited for the worst to pass.
And Virago?
Destroyed, but what remained of his power drove the veil away from Adresti.
You know, your kind always terrified me. But now I see man can be an even greater monster than any bloodsucker. The Inquisitors do whatever they want with us.
It turns out that the Inquisitors treat the people worse than we treated them. That made me feel confident to start collecting taxes again. We needed to be able to fund the rebuilding of the castle. I knew that this guy felt like my protection was valuable, so I felt less bad about doing so. I also got some information on some of the villagers. I wanted to find some that were hard workers, to say the least. Apparently, this guy named Dan chose crafting over going to a relative's funeral. Now that's dedication to the craft. I'm gonna go pay him a visit. I ended up finding Dan wandering around the village, so I decided to talk to him.
Fancy rags. We don't see folk like you in Majesty.
I've spent many years here at Castle Virago, serving by his side.
Quaggle? Folks said he was an evil creature. That's why the Inquisitors burned his place to cinders.
And how is life now, with the Inquisition in charge?
In charge? Ha! They just go where the church points and kill what they're told.
It really didn't seem like Dan liked the Inquisitors much, so I felt like he was the perfect first vampire servant. After our little conversation, I followed him around town, and then when the moment was right, I turned him into a vampire, specifically to serve me.
There's no place for you among the living. Your future belongs to me.
He probably doesn't even know what just hit him.
How can I aid our plans?
It seemed like I could now give him tasks to do, check his inventory, tell him to leave my castle, or just leave. Well, that was easy. I talked to another villager. His name was Dragomir. He honestly seemed a lot more respectful. So I asked him what was going on in the village to get the tea. He didn't even hesitate. He literally told me everything that he knew. Unfortunately, the people he had information on weren't what I was looking for. So I found another villager and got information from him. Sadly, he also didn't have anything good. As I continued through the village looking for some more villagers, I came across some Inquisitors, and they immediately recognized me. I didn't want to cause a huge scene in the village, so I started to run, until I got far away enough that I couldn't even see the Inquisitors anymore. I tried to explore more of the village away from the Inquisitors. I ended up coming across a coachman. He would be able to take me to the different areas of the map, but I wanted to gossip with him, and I got some really good information out of it. I marked my next victims and then started to walk back in the town. On the way, I came across a lady named Florica.
But I'm no fool. I know what you really are.
You speak boldly for someone standing alone with a vampire.
Weirdly enough, she knew that I was a vampire, but she was okay with it. So I talked to her and I got the latest gossip, finding out some more information on the villagers. Funny enough, I stumbled on one of the random villagers that I wanted to recruit. So I gave her the kiss of death and turned her into a vampire servant.
Join my bloodline, and there will be a grand eternity awaiting you.
Now that I had 2 servants, I headed back to the castle.
Thank you for giving my life a new meaning. How can I repay you?
I have a task for you.
I talked to Dan first. He was the first vampire that I recruited, and it turns out that there's a whole loyalty system. I need to keep him happy and loyal, otherwise he'll abandon us. It said that one of the first things he needed was a coffin to sleep in, which is reasonable. I was heading over to build him one, and that was when I realized I had a whole bunch of blood. So I deposited it into the core. I wanted to wait for Margarita before building another coffin to see if she needed one too. So I went out and got some more blood, and then when she arrived, headed back to the crypt. Once I was there, I planned out 2 more coffins because we all needed to sleep during the day. I also opened up the management screen. I could now finally use it. You assign your vampire servants jobs here. So for example, I put Dan on building things and then Margarita on clearing things. Margarita immediately ran over and started to destroy some of the ruins that still remained. Dan, on the other hand, was lazy. No, I'm just kidding. He didn't have the materials he needed to build the coffins. The chest inside of the crypt had to be full with everything he needed in order for him to start constructing. I took a look at what we were missing, and I headed out to start crafting some planks, because that's what we needed. Once I finished crafting the planks, I headed back inside of the crypt and put up the first coffin. Well, I guess I tried building it, but I was standing in the way, so it didn't let me. After successfully building the other coffin, I couldn't figure out what was going on, until I ran slightly further away from the second coffin. I happened to be in the building radius, where it wouldn't let it construct because I was basically blocking it from being constructed. After I got all of that sorted out, I assigned Dan and Margarita each to their own coffin. This would increase their happiness. I was honestly curious if Margarita was also collecting the materials that she was getting from destroying the ruins, and it turns out she was. I then decided to put Dan on the crafting station and told him to construct as many wooden planks as he possibly could. My only concern though was that we didn't have enough raw wood. I tried to go to sleep as it seemed like it was almost morning. Apparently though, it wasn't morning enough yet, so I couldn't sleep. When I headed back outside near the core, I saw Dan heading over to the crafting station, and he immediately got to work. I really felt like a vampire lord now. I had 2 servants doing my work for me. While Dan was crafting the wooden planks, I planned out a gathering station. This was going to be my secret to getting infinite resources, basically. In other words, I was just going to have my servants go and gather a bunch of stuff for me. Dan had finally produced enough wooden planks, so I went over and built the gathering station. Here, I could gather wood, limestone, sand, clay, and even wax for candles. I told Margarita to get out there and start gathering. Even though she was doing a good job clearing out the ruins, I felt like getting all of these materials was a lot more important. That was when I realized the core drains of blood over time. Because of this, I ended up taking Dan off of crafting and had him start feeding the core. When I talked to Razvin, he said that it seemed like I had everything under control. He told me that he was now going to guard the hill, so pretty much watching out for any Inquisitors that wanted to come and attack the core. My new primary mission became to empower the core, and I needed to do this by filling it up to 300 blood. So I ended up dumping all of the blood that I currently had into it, and then headed out to find some more animals to get blood from. That was when I came across the Veil. I wasn't able to go past it, or I would start taking damage. Those Inquisitor priests really have us trapped here. Since I couldn't really go the other way, I decided to head up a random pathway behind the castle. This led me into a gold mine of stags. Of course, I filled up on as much blood as I possibly could. I then headed over to what looked like an abandoned house. I first found some explorers' tomes, and then I found a random chest that had only 3 gold in it. That was all that was in this weird house, but hey, I guess it's better than nothing. After exploring the house, I headed back to the crypt, and then realized that it was almost morning, so I rested in my coffin, and woke up the following night. The first thing that I did when I woke up was check the core. We were at 262 out of 500 blood, and for my purposes, I only needed 300. So I filled it up to just over 300, and then I empowered the core. I got to make the decision of where I wanted to empower it to. There were 3 different regions that we needed to take over, and I ended up going with the Grove of Sorrows. The top portion of the core had completely broken off. It ended up revealing a very red inside gemstone. This seemed to increase the amount of vampires that I could have and strongholds. I now had a brand new quest. It's time to go visit Razvin at his lookout. I honestly have no clue how he found this little hole in the cave, or if he made it. Whatever it was, he did a good job.
Mercy? Never met her. Sounds boring.
When I went to go talk to him, he told me that there was a villager waiting for me on the bridge that led to our castle. I also told him how the core was now expanded to the Grove of Sorrows. So in other words, the veil had been lifted there. Razvin's contact was right where he said he would be, at the end of the bridge. I'm not sure it really matters because this guy definitely knows what we are, but I went out in my royal clothes to talk to him.
Greatest honor to stand in your presence.
His name was Gavril, and he was super respectful. He ended up telling me that a bunch of our villagers got hurt by some weird flying monster. I headed into the village to check it out. I made it to this scene, which was basically just a wheat field. It was a little bit suspicious because Sabina, a random lady at this scene who was trying to tell me what was going on, had some bats fly around her for a second. That's a vampire thing for sure. I would know. She described a monster that seemed like a bird, but with giant claws and giant wings. Apparently, it came down from the sky and attacked the villagers. I had a suspicion that another vampire was at work here, but maybe they had wings or something. Maybe it was even Sabina. I then investigated the crime scene. There were a couple bodies, and I got the accounts of the other citizens who saw what happened. One of the victims gave me a lead to head over to the Grove of Sorrows and find someone who might know some information on this kind of creature. On the way, I stumbled across another village. There also happened to be a random villager hanging out near a cart all by himself. So, I went into hunter mode and drank his blood, as I needed some. Nothing to see over here, folks. I didn't just bite someone's neck. As I continued down the road, I noticed a little camp on the top of a hill. I tried to get a little bit closer, but I still didn't really know the sneaking mechanics in this game, so I just hid behind some trees. This was a camp of Inquisitors, and now they see me. Around 5 Inquisitors surrounded me instantly. I was still getting used to the combat, so I did some jumping around when I definitely shouldn't have been. The melee Inquisitors were honestly pretty easy to handle. I would say that the crossbowmen were the most annoying. That was kinda crazy. I finished off the Inquisitors, and then looted them. That was when I noticed they had a vampire tier in their camp. I spent it on increasing my existence by 10%, which was definitely worth it. I then continued exploring until I ran right into another camp of Inquisitors. This time I was hiding in a bush, and they couldn't see me. After scouting them, I jumped out directly onto 2 of the enemies. One of them had a pretty large shield though, and we hadn't faced an Inquisitor like this before, so it was a little bit intimidating. Thankfully, it seemed like this shieldman didn't really know what he was doing. What was a pretty intense fight ended pretty quickly. I then gathered another vampire tier from the camp and some goodies from a chest. There was this random shrine on the side of the road. It was pretty creepy looking, even for a vampire. And there were some squirrel carcasses on it. I'm not going to ask what was going on over there. That was when I came across another Inquisitor camp. And a bridge that led to something that looked like another core. One problem though, there were quite a few Inquisitors just guarding it. Well, that really wasn't too bad. I interacted with the core-looking thing. Apparently, it was one of the strongholds I could build, and we were in the Grove of Sorrows. A random building structure appeared all around the new stronghold. This was the stronghold, and that crystal was the stronghold core. This is going to take a lot of time to build up. Well, actually, it's going to take my servants a lot of time to build it up. I realized that that stronghold had completely distracted me from what I came here for. To find the person who would know information on the Pale Soarer. That's just another name for that bat-like creature that attacked the village earlier. While I was looking for her, I came across some gold in a random cave. Of course, I mined and took it. After that, and a little bit of cliff diving, I came across a random village that almost looked magical. I then found a giant tree, And Kreita, person I was looking for, was underneath it.
Is it death?
She talked in a lot of riddles, and happened to know I was a vampire. This made me not really like her. But she gave me some pretty vital information. She told me about a cult that was going on nearby, and she told me to go investigate, as they might know what was going on with the Pale Soarer. Sadly, after getting all of that information, I had to head back to my crypt. It was almost morning time. Since I couldn't sleep just yet, I planned out building another coffin. I sadly didn't have all of the materials that I needed to actually construct it, so I took down a ruin to get them. That wasn't too hard. With the coffin's completion, I assigned Cyprian to it. In case you're wondering who that is, he was a random villager that had some pretty good traits. So I turned him into a vampire servant. Since it seemed like morning was taking forever to arrive, I traveled back to the Grove of Sorrow through the coach. This costed me 20 gold coins, but boy, was it worth it. I didn't have to run all the way back over here. Once back, I was tasked with talking to all of the villagers to get some information on the cult. If I was going to infiltrate it, I have to find out where they're meeting at first. I also got some good information on the villagers in the Grove of Sorrow. I talked to quite a few people in a bunch of different areas. That was when I finally got the location on where they meet. I decided to not waste any time at all, so I headed directly to the cave that they were meeting in. Once I made it down there, I saw there were a whole bunch of Inquisitors. There's no way the Inquisitors were the cult, right? That's when I saw all of the villagers slain on the ground. There was also a really giant Inquisitor with a huge hammer. Oh, wait, make that two of them. That worked out rather well. Jeez, those guys can take a beating. I honestly had no clue how to fight these guys, so I singled one off and then tested some of my abilities against him. I did the same thing with the other one as well. Once the Inquisitors were dealt with, I went around the cave looking for clues. That was when I came across the Tome of the Pale Soarer. This is exactly the kind of thing I was looking for. I brought the book back to Kreita. She told me to come back tomorrow and talk to her, so she could tell me about any findings she comes across. Since I had some time before I had to sleep for the next day, I went to a couple different Inquisitor huts and started taking them out. Let's just say I didn't find a lack of Inquisitors at this one. Funny enough, right in the middle of my fight, a sacred stag had wandered by. I hadn't come across one of these before, so I decided to feed on it. Of course, I then got the vampire tier and headed over to where I was building my stronghold. I had some supplies on me, so I was able to build a doorway and then do a decent amount of the flooring. I realized that I had completely forgot about my servants up until now, so I started using them to gather some materials and start crafting some items that I needed for building. I then headed to sleep for the day. That kind of feels weird to say. Once I woke up, I headed into town and caused a little bit of ruckus. I needed some more vampire servants, so I turned someone into one. That was when another villager spotted me. I ended up doing what I had to and took care of him. Alright, nothing happened here. Carry on. On the way heading over to Kreita, I decided to build a little bit more of the stronghold as I got some more materials. I then talked to her, and she basically told me to go put these random things at the different altars around the map. I kinda just agreed to it, as she said she would help me out and be on my side if I put up a stronghold around here. She also kinda held back on some of the information about the Pale Soarer, it seemed like. She pretty much just said that the monster has a lot more power and influence than she thought. I headed out on my journey to find the shrines, and of course on the way I hunted some stags, fought off some more Inquisitor camps to get some vampire tears, and came across a really cool looking door. This thing was definitely created by vampires, because in order to get in, I had to put some blood into these random statues. The door then opened by itself. And it looked like there was a vampire tier inside. Or maybe a few. It ended up being 3, so I now had 8 in total. I saw a pretty cool looking talent that I wanted to unlock, costing 9 vampire tiers. So I headed over to the next Inquisitor camp that I could find. Once I cleared it, I immediately grabbed the tier. I now could unlock the talent, which was turning into a bat. Now, you're probably thinking, why would I want to turn into a bat? Well, they can fly. This should make traveling places a whole lot easier. Of course, I immediately tried it out. Honestly, this is a lot more awesome than I thought. I can fly pretty high too, and fast. The only downfall about being in this bat state was that my blood drained a lot quicker. So realistically, yeah, I could fly around, but I couldn't do it for too long. Interestingly enough, you could even perform attacks, which was pretty funny. The first thing I did in this new bat form was pull up on some Inquisitors. They didn't even expect me. I bet you from their perspective it looked like a bat just flew in and then a vampire appeared out of nowhere. Towards the end of the fight, I almost got completely destroyed. One of the heavily armored Inquisitors was about to take a giant swing at me, but I was able to take him out before anything bad happened. I was, however, super disappointed, because I didn't see any vampire tiers at that Inquisitor camp that I had just taken out. I headed home in defeat, so that way I could sleep until the next night. The first thing that I did when I woke up was check out my management screen. I was pretty amazed because I could assign one of my servants to rebuild the stronghold in the Grove of Sorrows. Of course, I assigned Nadia to do that because there was no way I was going to build it myself. I then immediately headed over to the Coachman, so that way I could fast travel to the Grove of Sorrows. Of course, I stopped for a snack on the way. I then turned into my bat form and flew directly over to the very first location I needed to build a warding altar. I built it with a little bit of doubt and then headed to the next location. I got the second one done as well, and then finally the third. Since I was doing a lot of flying around, my blood levels were dropping pretty quickly, so I had to stop for a snack. 2 snacks to be exact. When I was refueled on blood, I headed back to the Grove of Sorrows, and honestly, this place was pretty beautiful. The giant tree in the center's got an aesthetic. Kreta basically told me good job, and then said she would join me once I build the stronghold. Of course, I headed over there to see how Nadia was doing, and honestly, she made a lot of progress. This place was looking pretty good. I also found a feature inside of the stronghold core that allowed me to rebuild it by paying around 730 gold coins. The stronghold has been completed. Honestly, that's the perfect location to build one too. With it now being completed, I decided to explore. And there was a chest that was connected to my chest back at the crypt, our main base. There were also quite a few coffins just laying around, which surprisingly enough, I wasn't able to sleep in. Finally, the roof didn't really have too much going on, but it was very scenic. I checked my servant management screen and saw that there was now a job for guarding the stronghold. So I was going to have to send some vampires over to keep this stronghold safe from attacks. I'm sure those Inquisitors will be on my doorstep soon enough. I traveled back to the crypt and checked the core there. I now needed to feed it 1,500 blood. That's literally 3 times the amount that we currently have. I needed to come up with some kind of plan to get that much blood into the core. While doing so, I started to destroy some of the old ruins. Let's just say it helped me focus on my ideas better. It wasn't the best plan in the world, but I knew that I could make servants feed the core. So why not just build a couple more coffins, and then max out the amount of people who are feeding the core? Obviously, I'm going to have to get some more vampire servants though to do this. Let's just say I went a little bit overboard with this. I was feeling pretty cocky, so I literally just started turning people into vampires in my village. I have a feeling that the villagers aren't going to want to pay their taxes after this. I completely forgot that I could fill up the core with my own blood as well. Once I remembered, I immediately filled it up with everything I had, and then flew out to go and get some more. We were literally so close. My servants can definitely do the rest. To pass some time while waiting, I started building more of the castle, exactly how I wanted it. Yeah, this was just flooring now, but I started to get a vision. After doing a little bit of crafting, I built a door and a doorway leading into what was going to be my new epic castle. I also threw up a couple walls, and windows too. This castle is gonna be massive. I empowered the core and unlocked Hell's Chasm. I then headed over to talk to Razvan to see if he could give me any advice. He pretty much just told me how to get there very quickly, but I didn't even need that information because I could fly. I headed out to go and find the village in Hell's Chasm. The first thing that I came across was an Inquisitor camp. And let me tell you, these Inquisitors were highly trained. They took me out. I literally died. But thankfully, being a vampire, that doesn't really mean anything. So I was able to respawn and head right back over. I was starting to get the vibe that this new region was a little bit more hardcore than what I was used to. The whole vibe just seemed dangerous, the Inquisitors were a lot better fighters here, and their camps were huge. I returned to where I just died. I of course snatched the vampire tear before any of the Inquisitors saw me. That was when one of the ones that had just killed me saw me. So I decided it was time to get revenge. Well, that was easier than I thought it was going to be. Where'd the other guy go? Not too far after the camp, I came across the village that I was looking for. I have no clue how people are even still living here. I started asking around to see what information the villagers would give me. I found out that the explosions that blew this place up were coming from an angry being. I also got the information that after Virago's castle fell was when the explosion started. Another villager told me that you could hear crying coming from the mines. This was all a lot to take in. There's a good chance that my good friend Rebecca, another vampire, could be the one causing this. She also served under Virago, hence how I know her. I still had a little bit of time before it turned day, so I flew into the mines. It seemed like this mine shaft was incredibly unstable. The whole thing would break out in shaking every few minutes. On the bright side though, there were a lot of really cool crystals in here. After quite a bit of time exploring, I came across some debris. So of course, I cleared it out. It looked like a staircase leading to a crypt. Surely enough, I found Rebecca's coffin. In order to open it though, I was gonna have to fill all of the statues around the room with blood. I didn't really have a lot in the moment. After putting some in the very first statue, I realized that I wasn't gonna have enough, so I had to figure something out quickly. I started looking through my inventory and came across hearts, which if consumed, I would get more blood. So I ate them. This worked out perfectly because I had quite a lot of hearts and I was able to fill the next two statues with blood.
It is time. Rebecca will rise once more.
Echoes of countless lives.
Rebecca has been awoken. We had a lot of catching up to do, as it's been only 100 years. Apparently, she told me that she fell in love with an Inquisitor. Then, after Virago fell, the Inquisitor she loved came with guards to come and kill her. This completely broke her heart, so she went into hiding, and that was when all of the explosions started. Apparently, the heartbreak caused her vampire powers to act all crazy. You know, just vampire things. Rebecca tasked me with hunting down the Inquisitor. In return, she told me she would run the stronghold for me that I was planning on building in Hell's Chasm. Funny enough, I snuck into the camp where the Inquisitor was as a bat, and nobody even noticed me until I started attacking them. Let's just say this fight was going splendidly, until randomly I got one-shotted. I honestly had no clue what even killed me. This was a little bit frustrating, so I decided to take some time and unwind by building the castle since I was already around here. It's always good to take a little break. Once I got the layout for some towers done, I ended up going to sleep for the day. Once I awoke, I headed back to the camp that had the Inquisitor I was hunting down. I was really hoping that I wasn't going to get one-shotted this time. I'll just have to pay more attention to the crossbow guy, I guess. Now, it was just me and Rebecca's ex-love. It was time to get revenge for her. He swung at me and I dodged it. That was when I sprung to attack and completely killed him. Taking out this Inquisitor was completely worth it. I not only got Rebecca's trust, but I also got 3 vampire tears in addition to it. I told Rebecca that I had completed the mission, and she told me she would come to the stronghold once it's built. I then headed to the location where I was planning on building the stronghold. I saw the stronghold core, and, of course, the Inquisitors were already here, so I had to take them out. These guys were a lot worse at fighting than the Inquisitors that we had just fought in. I completely demolished these guys. Once they were finally taken care of, I headed over to the stronghold core. And it turned out that I had enough gold coins to completely build a stronghold instantly. I was impressed with how cool it looked. This stronghold seemed to be structured the same exact way as the other one. The stone here was just a lot more epic. I completely forgot that I had gotten a lot of vampire tears lately. This inspired me to get a perk that increased my movement speed by 10% as a bat. Let's just say the flight home is going to be so much faster now. I also checked out what Rebecca had to trade, since she was now at the stronghold. After creating a couple more vampire servants in a nearby village, I realized that we had lost the stronghold in the Grove of Sorrows. Apparently some Inquisitors came and took it back. The second I found out, I immediately turned into a bat and flew directly over there. When I arrived, I noticed there were missing chunks on the stronghold, so they completely tried tearing this place down. It turned out that the Inquisitors didn't do a hit and run. They were still here, and they were trying to fight me. This completely threw me off, and I was caught off guard. These guys were no match for me, so I took them out swiftly, and then rebuilt the stronghold. This time though, I sent 2 of my vampire servants to protect it. We weren't gonna take any chances with this place again. I then returned home, and started filling the core with some of the blood that I had on me. It turns out that I need 2,500 blood inside of the core in order to be able to empower it again. So I headed out to get some blood and bring it back. Of course, one trip wasn't going to be enough, so I made a few. I finally had enough, so I empowered the core and unlocked the Fey Marshes region. Virago was pretty happy about this. I updated Razvan with what was going on. He gave me some advice about Fey Marshes, as he was pretty familiar with it. I then headed over there. I now know why they call it Fey Marshes. This whole area is basically just swamplands. I came across a very primitive looking town. The defenses weren't very good either. I entered the town to start investigating. Let me tell you, the citizens here looked pretty unique. I ended up finding out from one of the villagers that people make sacrifices in a cave to the northwest. I also found out that the beast they offer it to resembles a very pale human. This is starting to sound like another vampire. The final piece of information that I got was that the beast shares its wisdom with the people in exchange for the sacrifices. Now with all of this information, it only made sense to head over to the cave. When I arrived there was a whole bunch of debris covering the way in. So of course, I destroyed it. There were 2 different passageways. One led to a very creepy experimentation looking room, and the other, a coffin. The beast was Malik, an old vampire friend that I used to know. I had first thought that he was the pale soarer, but he claimed he wasn't. When I was talking to him, he asked me to perform an experiment. Go and stand outside of the veil for 20 seconds. Malik is basically the equivalent of a crazy scientist. He always has some weird theories, but sometimes they're right. When I reached the veil, I immediately started taking damage. And that was when I realized I wasn't going to survive out here very long. I just barely made it. That was only 5 seconds out of the 20 that I needed to perform. I dropped down into a very foggy area, and that was when I saw a bunch of Inquisitors. I immediately turned into a bat and started flying away. That didn't work though, because I had to change back since I was now out of blood. Thank goodness these doe were just hanging around here. I could now escape. That's exactly what I did. I was able to fly to the very wonky looking swamp village. That doe gave me just enough blood to make it all the way over here and feed on a human, almost fully restoring my blood meter. I then headed back out past the veil, just barely. I was able to spend all 20 seconds outside of the veil, but my blood completely ran out. So I was losing my existence and about to die. That was when I remembered I had leftover hearts. I quickly ate one, hoping that it would give me enough blood to last until I could find an animal. Luckily enough, when I was running, I came across a random rabbit. This made things so much easier. But of course there were some Inquisitors nearby, so I continued to run until I came across a stag stuck in a tree. The Inquisitors got a show, to say the least. I could now fly again, at least. With my newly acquired blood, I decided to mess with the Inquisitors. I flew into a nearby camp, stole a vampire tear, and then flew out of there. I then headed back to Malik, which he was buried in once again, weirdly enough. I talked with Malik, and he told me that he had a theory. He was thinking that the Pale Soarer was actually a vampire, or at least it used to be. It was a vampire with enhancements, and has been greatly affected by the veil. Malik now tasked me to go back into the marshes to look for a specific kind of plant that could help him determine who this vampire was. So I headed out looking for it. It wasn't too hard to find because Malik gave me a location. One problem though, the Inquisitors were guarding it. I had to fight them off in order to get this plant. It really wasn't that bad, at least until I got to the last guy. I was very close to dying, but I thankfully finished off the last enemy before he could kill me. I then went around collecting the plants that Malik needed for his next experiment. The Inquisitors must have known something about these because why else would they be guarding them? I returned to Malik's cave. This time though, I didn't see him downstairs, which was kind of weird. I decided to go check out that laboratory looking room, and surely enough, he was there. I guess it checks out why he has this here since he's basically a mad scientist. I gave him the plants, and then he told me to meet him tomorrow. Weirdly enough, the second that I stepped out of the cave, there was a huge explosion. There's absolutely no way he already blew himself up. I just gave him those plants. That explosion did draw in a lot of Inquisitors though. I turned around and went to go and check on Malik, just because I was a good friend. And I brought some Inquisitors with me. Let's see if they actually follow me all the way down here. When I entered Malik's lab, he was completely surrounded by green smoke, and seemed like he was not doing the best. He pretty much told me that the experiment failed, but he would be willing to overlook the stronghold just like Rebecca. Now I just need to build it. I headed over to the stronghold core site and then started to attack the Inquisitors. This time, there were 3 heavily armored knights. That's a little bit more than usual. Without any trouble, I took them all out, and then accessed the stronghold core. One issue though, I didn't have enough gold to instantly build the stronghold. I started placing down some of the pieces of it with the materials that I had. This should in theory make it a little bit cheaper to actually purchase the construction of. My plan did work to some extent. It lowered the price by around 200, which still wasn't enough. It was also getting super early, so I headed to the crypt and slept for the day. Once I awoke, I immediately headed over to a bandit camp in the marshes. I knew that the Inquisitors kept gold on them, so killing a few of them would get me a decent amount of gold. At least I hope so. After clearing the camp, I had 988 coins. This still was not enough, sadly. I did, however, go check out my arcanes and unlocked a new talent. It decreased my existence regen threshold by 5%. I cleared out a few more Inquisitor camps and then headed back to the stronghold core so I could instantly build the stronghold in Fame Marsh. It appeared that I had unlocked more building structures, which was pretty cool. I still needed to finish building my own castle. I returned to Razvan and told him that I found Malik and how the locals treated him basically like a god. He honestly wasn't surprised at all. My conversation with Razvan got a little bit emotional. He basically was telling me that he never wanted to become a vampire in the first place, and it kind of seemed like he was almost blaming me for turning him into one. That was when Kreta from the Grove of Sorrows came looking for me. I knew that it had to be urgent if she came all the way over here, so I ran outside to go and find her. When she arrived, she was acting pretty cocky, which I didn't really like. She then went on to tell me that she knew who the Pale Soarer was, and this whole time, we've been serving the same master. It was in that moment the core started going crazy. Rebecca, Malik, and I gathered around it, and saw the Pale Soarer descend from the sky himself.
Cutting down Inquisitors one by one. You are the greatest servant I ever had. Listen, my child. We sought balance with humanity, but there is no balance. Now I know it. You either tear or get torn apart.
The Pale Soarer was Virago, and apparently he had a complete change in mindset on how he wanted to work with the humans. Not at all. I immediately headed over to go and tell Razvan. Razvan had saw everything. He then started telling me that he didn't think we had souls anymore, and clearly Virago didn't either.
I sense your disappointment, but this is who I truly am. Bloodthirst unchained. And soon, I will show you true power as your creator.
You are not the man who made me.
I was in complete and utter shock. Virago was no longer the man that he used to be. It was in that moment that I finished all of the content in the early access of this game. But my journey didn't end there. I had to go back and finish off the rest of the achievements.